Our next panelist is Andrea Voyer, who is an assistant professor in the Department of Sociology and Anthropology. She teaches classes on immigration, racial and ethnic relations, and the city. Her research focuses on immigration and social inclusion, and her talk will be on white privilege and welfare policies.
One of the things about privilege, it's established as a psychological fact of privilege that we like to forget about it. And in my intro class this morning, we started some work on stratification, and they played a game of Monopoly. The game was rigged, and they knew it was rigged. Some people had lots of wealth, some people had not very much wealth. Some people had already some properties. Actually, one person had all the railroads. For those of you who play Monopoly, that's a big deal. And still, what we know is that when people play a game of rigged Monopoly, and they know it's rigged, if you give them a questionnaire afterward and ask, did they deserve to win, they say yes. So, one of the things I like to do when I talk about something like white privilege, of course we could talk about it all day, is what have we already forgotten? And I think that if we're going to look at what we've already forgotten, we can go back about 80 years to the New Deal. Hopefully you guys know what the New Deal is. Basically, the New Deal was the first time we had systematic social welfare offered by the government of the United States of America. This happened during the Depression, and the Roosevelt administration developed several programs that were designed to mitigate the harmful economic impacts of the Great Depression and to deal with the poverty and unemployment, all the other things that were going on. The New Deal was touted as a program for everyone, but the fact of the matter is that research shows that from the earliest days of social welfare programs in this country, race mattered. I'm not going to get into all the details because I only have a few minutes, but basically the way that the New Deal was developed, Social Security, which was developed in the New Deal, excluded domestics and agricultural workers, groups that were much more likely to be African American and Latino. In terms of agricultural workers, the Roosevelt administration said that they would deal with this agriculture differently, so they developed a bill called the Agricultural Adjustment, or an office called the Agricultural Adjustment Administration, which made direct payments to farmers or landowners to not sow their fields, to not grow crops, because there was no market for them. So they were trying to protect the prices of crops. And so those landowners very willingly threw that cash in their pockets. Well, who got screwed over in that deal? The sharecroppers. Once again, primarily African American. Farm workers in the Southwest, primarily Mexican. So this Social Security Administration and the New Deal, even in those early days, left out people of color. There's a fabulous book about this, and this book is called Three Worlds We Believe. I just want to tell you a little bit about it today, because it's very relevant here. One of the things that we typically hear in terms of discussions of welfare and the safety net and all of this is this idea that these lazy welfare queens, and code that for race the same way you do criminality, are taking our welfare. They're taking our money. They're robbing from us. In fact, what the research shows is that generally across the board in terms of the history of social welfare in this country, it is primarily white people who get the benefit of government money. And we see this very starkly in this book about the rise of the welfare state, in which different regions of the country, depending on who was accessing these New Deal programs, funded them differently. In the Northeast, where the people who were accessing New Deal programs were primarily European immigrants, they were white, federal money was used for the programs. In the South, where the people who were accessing, who needed to access those programs were primarily black, federal money wasn't as used as regularly for the programs, and instead they were funded more through service organizations and charity, private charity. In the Southwest, where the people who would need to access those programs were primarily Mexican, actually the program was a program of mass deportation, even though many of those people were legal residents of the United States. So what you see here is that, oh, actually let me give you the next one. That this is the amount of money coming from public sources is only, you're seeing significant money, that's public money, when it's foreign-born whites who are accessing programs. The rest of the time, it comes from private sources, or not at all. One example. Another example that we should remember, that we want to forget, is the GI Bill in the United States. After World War II, we had lots of troops coming home, and they were promised things like college education and housing, all kinds of other stuff. Well, the thing is that even though there were lots of people of color who served in the armed forces, the way that it worked when people returned to the U.S. is that loans, low-cost loans in the suburbs and new developments underwritten by the U.S. government, so government, federal money, developing these housing programs, those housing developments were racially restricted. They often wouldn't sell to people of color. Mortgages that were underwritten by federal money. We had an official system that looked at the racial demography of census tracts of the neighborhoods where they would be making the loans, and didn't give loans in areas that were less white. So this is federal money being funneled to white people. A place like Levittown was basically built on federal money. People were given the option to buy in. That house that they bought was their nest egg. They were able to borrow against the house. They were able to send their kids to college. They accumulated wealth. This program was not made available by and large to people of color. Instead, they got to reap the benefits of urban renewal, high-rise rental projects in urban areas. Completely different programs. One, the one that was made available to whites, was the transfer of federal public money to white people. The other, no such transfer of wealth. So it's really important to remember these things. And this is not just history. We still see today the legacy of these and similar programs that started some families on the path to being middle class and left other families behind. This is just a basic graphic that shows you the share of wealth relative to the share of population of different groups, which is to say, white people, how much of their wealth do they hold relative to their population size. So anything above 1, and you see the 1 here on the side, means that you're holding more wealth than you ought to have.
The other is Asian.
So we can see that whites have more wealth relative to their population size. Blacks and Latinos, less. Others, really complicated. It's a big group of a lot of different people. We could talk about that at length. So as I said in the beginning, this is really important to remember because we work hard. We do our best at things. We struggle and we're effortful. But our success depends on a lot of things. Access, how people see us, how we feel about ourselves, the situations that we find ourselves in. And those things have been constructed historically in a way that has systematically privileged white people. So, thank you.